right now, and he's pausing because it appears that someone has had a medical episode behind him there. You can see a lot of people fanning that person who collapsed, and then it looks like there are emergency workers, possibly someone from the fire department there assisting. Yeah,
you heard some commotion a little bit as President Trump was giving his speech. We don't know exactly what the issue is with that spectator who it looks like may have collapsed at some point during the speech, but you did hear President Trump say, is there a doctor somewhere in the building? And now we're seeing those first responders there.
We're just waiting for the president. He's being just patient here, wanting to make sure, of course, that person gets the medical attention they need as they assist that person, and just trying to kind of take a step back and wait and be respectful before he delivers the rest of his message here. Again, he's at a logistics facility there in Hebron, Kentucky, before he's set to depart CVG around 6 o'clock this evening. He's been talking for about 30 minutes, 30 minutes, talking about a number of different issues. Of course, the midterm elections that are coming up, also talking about a bunch of jobs that he says that are being invested into the United States. And then, as we expected, also talking about the war going on right now in Iran.
Yeah, again, it looks like the speech delayed right now, but yeah, he mentioned some of the big investments that were happening. He mentioned Ford, Apple, GE as some of the big companies that have made some big investments in Kentucky. He went into great detail about the dollar figures behind them, but yeah, it's been going on for about 25 or 30 minutes or so that we've been listening in on this speech. Again, the president taking a pause in this speech because somebody in the crowd seems to have had some sort of medical episode, and first responders right now tending to that individual.
Before the president talked there, he was talking a lot about the competition, of course, about Democrats that he is not supportive of course, but it looks as though luckily they've been able to help that person who collapsed a short time ago right behind the president. Honestly, we didn't even really see it until a few people started sort of yelling for help, and that's when the president turned around and said, do we have a doctor in the house who can help? I think to your right there, you're seeing what looks to be possibly a firefighter or an EMT who's assisting that woman there who may have had some sort of medical episode. Not sure if it's hot in that area or not. I know it's a really humid day out there. This is a manufacturing plant, so it might be humid in there as well, as you've got, hundreds of people who are packed in there shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah, and so it looks like, if I'm not mistaken, somebody obviously who works very close with the president, Dr. Oz may be actually among those who are tending to this individual who are who has collapsed. I believe that's him right there who just gave the president a thumbs up. So it looks like everything may be okay. You're seeing the round of applause right now, but this doesn't look to be hopefully anything serious. There's not too much of a rush to get this person removed. But yeah, it looks like Dr. Oz, there she is right there, that we're seeing the person who may have collapsed at some point. Again, we don't know exactly what this medical emergency was.
Yeah, it looks like they're trying to get her off there, and you're right, Chris, that is Dr. Oz to the left there. You can see with the Navy jacket holding her hand, escorting her out. He has been a staunch supporter of the president's, and then it looks as though possibly Secret Service and, of course, emergency workers from over there in northern Kentucky making sure that she is taken to safety and getting the treatment that she needs. And in the meantime, she's giving a kiss to the crowd and to the president.
And you're hearing the roar of applause, and you're hearing President Trump's words of encouragement. But we've been talking about this, how long people have been waiting, standing outside and in some of this nasty weather out there. So you can imagine how exhausting this probably would be for a lot of people who are waiting to hear the president speak, now finally inside and listening to the president.
And as Todd Dykes was telling us, Mike Dardis, Brian Hamrick, all there at that Hebron facility. I mean, you had hundreds of people out there today. Many had to be turned away. So many people wanted to go and support the president. And so a lot of those people had been waiting hours and hours in line today before ever getting inside the facility.
All right, we're seeing that round of applause, and it looks like President Trump is about to resume.